The stars looked different when you were about to die. Captain Li Wu thought this as he watched the massive alien warship grow larger on his transport's viewing screen. His cargo vessel, the Sol Dawn, was nothing compared to the monster bearing down on them. The alien ship was dark metal and sharp edges, like someone had tried to turn hatred into something that could fly through space. "Captain, they're targeting us," said his communications officer, Yunna. Her voice was steady, but Li Wu could hear the fear underneath.
"Should I send a distress signal?"
Li Wu looked at the 3 other ships in their small convoy. All cargo vessels like his own, carrying supplies to the outer colonies. Nothing military about them. Nothing threatening. Just ordinary people doing ordinary work, now caught in the path of the Valthuran war machine. "Send it," he said quietly, "but keep it short. Tell them we're carrying medical supplies and food. Nothing more." The alien ship didn't seem to care about their message. Bright lights flashed from its weapons, and one of the convoy ships exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The Sol Dawn shook as debris hit their hull. "Surrender now or be destroyed," came the alien voice through their communications. The translator made it sound cold and mechanical, but Li Wu could hear the arrogance behind the words. These creatures thought humans were just another weak species to crush. "This is Captain Li Wu of the merchant vessel Sol Dawn," he replied. "We surrender. We have civilians on board. Prepare to be boarded," the alien voice commanded. Li Wu turned to his crew. There were only 12 of them, and half were not even military. Kim Jun worked the engines. Park Bo operated their small mining equipment. They had signed up to carry cargo between planets, not fight a war. "Listen carefully," Li Wu said. "Do exactly what they say. Don't fight back. Don't try to be heroes. We stay alive by being smart, not brave." Yunna frowned. "Captain, surely we should—" "No," Li Wu said firmly. "Trust me on this." The alien boarding craft attached to their ship with a loud clang. Li Wu could hear cutting tools working on their airlock. Soon armed figures in dark armor would be walking through their corridors. The thought should have terrified him, but instead Li Wu felt oddly calm. The airlock opened with a hiss of pressurizing air. The first alien through was tall and covered in scales that looked like dark green metal. Its eyes were yellow and cold, and it carried a weapon that hummed with energy. More aliens followed, their boots making sharp sounds on the metal floor. "You are the captain?" the lead alien asked. Its voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. "I am Captain Li Wu," he replied, keeping his hands visible and empty. The alien studied him for a long moment. "I am War Admiral Kethvar of the Valthuran hegemony. Your ship and crew are now prisoners of war." Li Wu nodded slowly. "I understand. May I ask what you intend to do with my people?" Kethavar's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, showing sharp teeth. "That depends on how useful you prove to be, human. We have questions about your species' defenses." "I'm just a cargo captain," Li Wu said. "I don't know anything about military matters." "We shall see." Kethavar gestured to his soldiers. "Take them." The aliens separated the crew, putting them in groups of 3 or 4. Li Wu found himself with Yunna and Kim Jun, their hands bound with some kind of metal restraints that felt warm against his skin. They were marched through the alien ship's corridors, past walls covered in symbols he couldn't read and machinery he didn't understand. The Valthuran ship was huge inside. Li Wu counted at least 20 levels as they were led to what looked like a detention area. The cells were made of some transparent material, probably force fields rather than glass. Each cell was small but clean, with basic furniture built into the walls. "Comfortable accommodations for primitive species," one of the alien guards said with amusement. Li Wu was put in a cell by himself, while Yunna and Kim Jun were placed together in the cell next to his. Through the transparent walls he could see other human prisoners from the convoy ships that had been captured. Maybe 30 people total, all looking scared and confused. Hours passed. Li Wu sat quietly on the simple bed and watched the aliens work. Through his cell wall he could see part of the ship's bridge. Alien officers moved between control stations, their scales catching the light from dozens of screens and displays. Everything looked efficient and military. Kethavar appeared in front of his cell without warning. The War Admiral was even more impressive up close, nearly 7 feet tall with scars across his scaled face that spoke of many battles. "You seem remarkably calm for a prisoner," Kethavar observed. Li Wu looked up at him. "Being scared won't change anything." "Indeed. But most creatures show fear when facing their conquerors," Your species is different. How so? Kethavar walked closer to the force field. We have been monitoring your communications. Your government knows we are coming. They know their outer colonies are falling, yet they do not beg for mercy. They do not offer tribute. They simply prepare. What else would you expect? Wisdom, Kethavar said sharply. The Valtheran hegemony has conquered 17 star systems. We have destroyed species with technology far more advanced than yours. The wise choice is surrender. Li Wu stood slowly and walked to face the War Admiral. And yet here we are. Something flickered in Kethavar's yellow eyes. Annoyance maybe, or confusion. Your confidence is misplaced, human. We have over 10,000 ships approaching your home system. Your scattered defensive fleets cannot stop us. You're probably right, Li Wu said with a slight smile. Then why do you seem so unconcerned? Li Wu was quiet for a moment. Then he looked directly at the alien commander. Because you really should have stayed home. Kethavar stared at him for a long time. The scaled alien seemed to be trying to understand something, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together properly. Finally, he turned and walked away, leaving Li Wu alone in his cell. From his position, Li Wu could see the vast fleet moving through space toward Earth. Thousands of dark ships, each one capable of destroying cities. It was an impressive sight, and it would have terrified most people. But Li Wu just watched calmly, that same small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The real war was about to begin, and the Valtherans had no idea what they were walking into. 3 days passed as the Valtheran fleet moved deeper into human space. Li Wu spent most of his time watching the bridge activities through his transparent cell wall. The aliens worked with military precision, but he noticed they were getting more relaxed as each day passed. The human prisoners had been moved to a central detention area where they could see each other. Li Wu counted 28 people from the convoy, including Yoon Na Kim Jun and a mining engineer named Park Bo. They all looked scared, but they followed Li Wu's example of staying calm and quiet. Yoon Na managed to catch his attention during the morning feeding time. She pressed her hand against the force field and mouthed words silently. Why are you not worried? Li Wu just smiled and tapped his temple with one finger, then pointed toward the bridge. She should watch and learn, he was telling her. Trust that there was more going on than what they could see. The Valtheran officers were intercepting human communications constantly. Li Wu could hear them talking about the messages they caught from various human colonies and military outposts. The aliens seemed pleased with what they were finding. Another distress call from the mining station at Titan. One officer reported to Kethavar. They are requesting immediate evacuation assistance. And the response from Earth Command? Kethavar asked. The same pattern, War Admiral. They are pulling back their defensive fleets to protect the inner planets. All outer colony forces have been ordered to retreat or evacuate. Kethavar looked satisfied. As expected. They know they cannot match our numbers, so they abandon the weak to save what they can. Li Wu listened to this conversation with interest. The aliens were hearing exactly what they expected to hear. Panic, retreat, desperate calls for help. It all fit their understanding of how a weaker species should react when facing overwhelming force. But something nagged at Li Wu's mind. The pattern was almost too perfect, too predictable, like actors following a script rather than real people facing disaster. The next day brought their first real battle. The fleet encountered a human patrol group near the Jupiter system. 8 human ships against 200 Valtheran vessels. Li Wu watched the engagement on the bridge displays, seeing the small blue dots representing human ships moving against the vast cloud of red dots that was the alien fleet. The battle lasted 20 minutes. The human ships fought bravely, destroying several Valtheran vessels before being overwhelmed. But what struck Li Wu was how they fought. Not like desperate defenders, but like people buying time. They would hit hard, then retreat, then hit again from a different angle, never staying in one place long enough to be completely destroyed. Cowards, one Valtheran officer commented. They run instead of standing their ground. Kethavar was studying the tactical display with more interest. No, he said slowly. They are delaying us. Each attack slows our advance by several hours. But for what purpose? They cannot stop us with such small forces. Perhaps they hope reinforcements will arrive. Li Wu felt a small surge of pride in his chest. The Valtherans were starting to ask the right questions, but they were still thinking like conquerors. They couldn't imagine that humanity might have reasons beyond simple survival for fighting the way they did. That evening, Kethvar came to visit the prisoners again. This time he brought several other officers with him. They stood in front of the cells like tourists looking at animals in a zoo. "Tell me about your military leaders," Kethvar said to Li Wu. "I'm a cargo captain," Li Wu replied. "I don't know much about military matters. Yet you seem confident that your species will survive this war." Li Wu shrugged. "Hope is a powerful thing." One of the other officers, younger and more aggressive than Kethvar, stepped forward. "Hope will not stop our weapons, human. We have seen your defensive capabilities. Your largest ships are smaller than our escorts. Your most powerful weapons barely scratch our armor." "That's probably true," Li Wu agreed. The young officer looked frustrated. "Then why do you not despair? Why do you not beg for mercy?" Li Wu was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at each of the alien officers in turn. "Because the real show hasn't started yet." Kethvar and his officers exchanged glances. The war admiral stepped closer to the force field. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean you've been fighting our farmers and miners and transport pilots," Li Wu said quietly. "Brave people, good people, but not our real military. Your patrol fleets are exactly what they appear to be. Patrols, border guards. The people who watch for trouble and report back when they find it." The young officer made a sound of disbelief. "You expect us to believe that your species has hidden armies? Secret fleets we cannot detect?" Li Wu smiled. "I don't expect you to believe anything. But you might want to ask yourself why every human you've captured seems so calm about all this." It was true, Li Wu realized as he said it. Looking around at the other prisoners, he saw fear but not despair. Worry but not hopelessness. Even Park Bo, who had been crying the first day, now watched the aliens with steady eyes. Kethvar studied the human prisoners more carefully. "You have been in communication with each other," he accused. "When?" Li Wu asked. "Under your constant observation? Through force fields that block everything except air and light. How exactly would we manage that? Then how do you explain this attitude?" Li Wu leaned back against the wall of his cell. "Maybe we just know something you don't." The aliens left after that, but Li Wu could see them talking in urgent, low voices on the bridge. Kethvar kept looking back at the detention area, his yellow eyes thoughtful and worried. 2 more days passed. The fleet encountered more human resistance. Always small forces that fought hard and then disappeared. Mining stations that were already evacuated when they arrived. Research outposts that destroyed themselves rather than be captured. Supply depots that turned out to be empty, except for automated systems playing recorded messages. Li Wu noticed that Yun Na had somehow managed to access a maintenance terminal during the daily cleaning period. She was clever with computers, and the aliens probably didn't realize how much she could learn from their systems. When she caught his eye later, she held up 3 fingers, then made a circular motion with her hand. 3 days, she was telling him. Something was happening in 3 days. That night, Kim Jun started talking to the guards. Not pleading or complaining, just making conversation. He had always been good with people, able to make friends anywhere. Even the alien guards seemed to find him amusing, answering his questions about their homeworld and their military service. "Your fleet is very impressive," Kim Jun said to one guard. "How many ships do you have in total?" "More than enough to crush your pathetic species," the guard replied. But he seemed pleased by the compliment. "I've been counting the ones I can see through the windows. Must be at least 5,000. "Nearly 11,000, the guard said proudly. "The largest fleet in Valthuran history." Kim Jun whistled appreciatively. "That's amazing. I bet your commanders are confident about the outcome. Victory is certain. We will be at your homeworld in 6 days, and your species will surrender or be destroyed." After the guard left, Kim Jun caught Li Wu's eye and nodded slightly. Now they knew the exact timeline. 6 days until the fleet reached Earth. 3 days until something. Li Wu settled back to wait. The pieces were moving into position, just as they should be. The Valthurans thought they were winning, and in a way they were right. They were winning exactly the way humanity wanted them to win. The hardest part was keeping the smile off his face. The Valthuran fleet reached the outer edge of the Sol system on schedule. Li Wu watched from his cell as the bridge erupted in activity. Officers moved between stations, calling out reports and updating tactical displays. The main screen showed a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. with thousands of red dots representing their own ships and a smaller cluster of blue dots near Mars. "Contact," announced the sensor officer. "Human fleet detected in Mars orbital space. Approximately 800 vessels." Keithvar moved to the center of the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. 800, he repeated. "Larger than their patrol groups, but still manageable." "War Admiral," called another officer. "We are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Li Wu was looking at a human face. A woman in military uniform with short dark hair and determined eyes. Her name tag read Admiral Park. "This is Admiral Park, son of the Earth Defense Fleet," she said. "You are entering sovereign human space. Turn back now, or we will be forced to defend ourselves." Kethvar stepped forward so the camera could see him. "I am War Admiral Kethvar of the Valtheran Hegemony. You are outnumbered more than 13 to 1. Surrender now and your species may survive as servants." Admiral Park's expression didn't change. "That is unacceptable. All human ships prepare for battle." The transmission ended. Kethvar looked satisfied as he turned to his officers. "Begin the advance. Destroy any ship that resists." Li Wu pressed closer to his cell wall to get a better view of the tactical display. The human fleet was moving into a defensive formation around Mars, using the planet's gravity well and orbital stations to their advantage. It was a good position, but against 11,000 enemy ships it looked hopeless. "They're brave," Yun-Na said quietly from her cell, "but this is going to be a massacre." Li Wu glanced at her, then looked back at the display. "Maybe," he said. The battle began 2 hours later. Li Wu watched as the first Valtheran attack waves hit the human defensive line. The humans fought well, their ships moving in coordinated patterns that reminded him of a dance. They focused their fire on specific targets, destroying Valtheran vessels with precise strikes before moving to new positions. But the numbers were overwhelming. For every Valtheran ship destroyed, the humans lost 2 or 3 of their own. The blue dots on the tactical display grew fewer, while the red cloud advanced steadily forward. "Remarkable," Kethvar commented to his officers. "Their coordination is excellent. Much better than we expected from such a primitive species." "They are still losing," the tactical officer pointed out. "Yes, but slowly. They are making us pay for every victory." Li Wu noticed something else about the battle. The human ships weren't just fighting and dying randomly. They were falling back in an organized pattern, always keeping their formation intact even as they retreated. It looked like a defeat, but it was the most orderly defeat he had ever seen. The fighting continued for 6 hours. Gradually, the human fleet was pushed back from Mars toward Earth. Their defensive line contracted but never broke completely. Even when individual ships were destroyed, the rest of the fleet maintained its formation and kept fighting. "Human losses at 70%, reported the sensor officer. "Remaining vessels retreating toward Earth orbital space." Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. "As expected. Signal the fleet to pursue but maintain formation. We will finish this at their homeworld." During a brief lull in the fighting, Li Wu saw Yun-Na moving carefully toward a maintenance panel in her cell. The aliens had searched the cells thoroughly, but they hadn't thought to disable every system. While the guards were distracted by the battle, she managed to access a communication terminal. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, sending what looked like another human distress signal. The message was brief, probably just a few words, but Li Wu could see the timestamp she was embedding in the transmission. It wasn't a call for help. It was a countdown. One of the Valtheran officers noticed the transmission and quickly traced it back to the detention area. Guards rushed in, pulling Yun-Na away from the terminal and putting restraints on her hands. "What was that message?" Kethvar demanded when he arrived. Yun-Na looked terrified. Just trying to contact my family," she stammered. "I wanted them to know I was alive." Kethvar studied the message on a portable display. "It says package ready for delivery. What package?" "I don't know," Yun-Na said, tears in her eyes. "I just repeated what I heard other prisoners saying. I thought it was some kind of code for I'm alive." The War Admiral looked suspicious, but the message seemed harmless enough. A desperate prisoner trying to contact her family wasn't unusual. He ordered extra guards for the detention area and returned to the bridge. Li Wu caught Yun-Na's eye and nodded slightly. She had done well. The message had been intercepted just as it was supposed to be. The Valtherans now had it in their communication logs, officially received and processed. When the time came, There would be no doubt about when it was sent. The battle resumed as the Valtheran fleet chased the surviving human ships toward Earth. The humans had less than 200 vessels left, and they were badly damaged. They took refuge behind Earth's orbital defense platforms, massive stations bristling with weapons and shields. "Impressive defenses," one Valtheran officer commented. "Those stations are larger than some of our battleships." "But still outnumbered," Kethvar replied. "Begin bombardment of the orbital platforms. We end this war today." The final phase of the battle was brutal but predictable. The human defense platforms fought magnificently, their powerful weapons destroying dozens of Valtheran ships. But there were too many attackers. One by one, the great stations fell silent, their debris joining the wreckage already scattered through Earth's orbit. As the last defense platform exploded, Kethvar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human home fleet was destroyed. Their orbital defenses were gone. Earth lay defenseless before his victorious armada. "Scan the planet," he ordered. "I want to know their population centers, their military installations, everything." "War Admiral," the sensor officer called out. "I'm detecting some unusual readings. Multiple energy signatures around the planet, but they're very faint." "Debris from the battle?" "No, sir. These signatures are different. I can't quite identify them." Kethvar frowned. "Clarify." "It's as if there are large objects in space that our sensors can barely detect. They might be ships, but if so, they're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered." "How many objects?" The sensor officer worked frantically at his controls. "Difficult to say, sir. The readings keep changing. Could be sensor echoes or what? Or there are hundreds of ships out there that we can't see properly." A cold feeling settled in Kethvar's stomach. He turned to look at the human prisoners in their cells. Li Wu was standing at his force field wall, watching the bridge with that same calm expression he had worn since his capture. "Bring the human captain to the bridge," Kethvar ordered. Guards escorted Li Wu from his cell, keeping their weapons trained on him. He walked calmly, showing no sign of fear even surrounded by armed aliens. When he reached the bridge, he looked around with obvious interest, taking in the displays and control stations. "Your fleet is destroyed," Kethvar said. "Your planet is defenseless. Do you finally understand your situation?" Li Wu looked at the tactical display, which showed the wreckage of the human fleet scattered around Earth. Then he looked back at Kethvar, and for the first time since his capture, his expression changed. The calm mask slipped, and underneath was something that made the War Admiral step backward. "You think that was our fleet?" Li Wu asked quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the bridge, Valtheran officers stopped what they were doing and turned to listen. "What do you mean?" Kethvar demanded. Li Wu smiled, but it wasn't the same gentle expression he had shown before. This smile was sharp and dangerous, like the edge of a blade. "War Admiral," the sensor officer called out urgently. "Those energy signatures are getting stronger." "Much stronger." "Show me," Kethvar snapped. But his eyes never left Li Wu's face. The main display changed to show a sensor sweep of the space around Earth. At first, there were only the expected signatures from the Valtheran fleet and the battle debris. But as they watched, new contacts began appearing. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. "Impossible," whispered one of the officers. Li Wu's smile grew wider. "You really should have done your homework before starting this war." The surrender negotiations took place in the main conference room of the Valtheran flagship. Admiral Park Sun had come aboard with a small diplomatic team, while Kethvar was accompanied by his senior officers. Li Wu stood quietly to one side, no longer a prisoner but not quite free either. His role in the deception was too important to ignore. "The terms are simple," Admiral Park said, placing a data tablet on the conference table. "Complete surrender of all Valtheran military forces, withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations to the species you have enslaved, and acceptance of galactic oversight to ensure you never threaten other worlds again." Kethvar studied the tablet carefully. These terms would effectively end the Valtheran hegemony as a political entity. "Yes," Admiral Park agreed. "That's the point. And if we refuse?" Admiral Park gestured toward the view screen, which showed the massive human fleet surrounding them. "Then we destroy your entire invasion force here and now, and send a larger fleet to your homeworld to finish the job. You would commit genocide?" "No," Admiral Park said firmly. "We would end your government and military. But we have no interest in harming civilian populations. The Valtheran people can have a future, just not as conquerors. Li Wu watched the alien officers exchange glances. They were proud warriors, but they weren't stupid. The tactical situation was hopeless, and everyone in the room knew it. How do we know your species won't simply replace us as the galaxy's dominant empire? Asked the Valtheran tactical officer. Li Wu stepped forward slightly. Because we've already had that power for decades and we chose not to use it. We could have conquered half the galaxy by now if that was our goal. Then what is your goal? Kethavar asked. Balance, Admiral Park answered. A galaxy where species can develop and grow without fear of being enslaved or destroyed. We want to be the ones who stop empires like yours, not create new ones. The negotiations continued for 2 hours. The Valtherans tried to negotiate better terms, but they had no leverage. The human fleet was real, it was overwhelmingly powerful, and it was pointing weapons at them. In the end, Kethavar signed the surrender documents. There is one thing I must know, Kethavar said as the formal ceremony concluded. How long have you been planning this specific operation? Admiral Park looked at Li Wu, who nodded. 18 months, Li Wu said, from the moment our agents confirmed you were planning to invade human space. 18 months to set up this elaborate deception? Actually, the deception was the easy part, Li Wu admitted. We just had to act like the weak, scattered species you expected us to be. The hard part was coordinating the movement of 5,000 ships without anyone noticing. 5,000, Kethavar repeated, still having trouble believing the number. Actually, it's closer to 6,000 now, Admiral Park said casually. We had another battle group on standby in case this fleet proved insufficient. The color drained from Kethavar's scaled face. 6,000 ships. How many do you have in total? Li Wu and Admiral Park exchanged a look. Let's just say we take defense seriously, Admiral Park replied. After the surrender ceremony, Li Wu found himself back on the bridge, but this time as an observer rather than a prisoner. Yun Na, Kim Jun, and Park Bo had been released, and were helping to coordinate the transfer of Valtheran prisoners to human custody. The reversal of roles was almost amusing. Captain Li, Kethavar approached him. The former war admiral looked older somehow, diminished by defeat. I have a question that has been bothering me. Go ahead. When I first interrogated you, you seemed genuinely calm. Not afraid, not angry, just peaceful. How were you so certain this plan would work? Li Wu considered the question carefully. Because I know my people, War Admiral. When humans are truly threatened, we don't panic or despair. We plan, we prepare. We do whatever it takes to survive and protect what we care about. Even sacrifice thousands of your own people as bait. Those volunteers weren't sacrificed, Li Wu said firmly. They chose to give their lives to save billions of others. There's a difference between sacrifice and murder. And you? What was your role in all this, really? Li Wu smiled slightly. I volunteered to be captured so we could observe your fleet and make sure you committed everything to the attack. If you had held back reserves or split your forces, the plan might not have worked. You risked your life on a plan that might not have worked. War Admiral. My species has been risking everything for 50 years on the chance that we might one day need to defend ourselves. This was just the final test. Kethavar was quiet for a moment. Your species is terrifying. No, Li Wu disagreed. We're careful. There's a difference. The transfer of command took most of the day. Human officers came aboard to oversee the disarming of Valtheran weapons and the preparation of the fleet for escort back to human space. The Valtheran crews would be processed as prisoners of war, but with the understanding that they would eventually be repatriated once the peace treaty was finalized. As evening approached, Li Wu stood on the observation deck watching the human fleet. Ships that had been hidden for decades were now visible in all their glory. Massive battleships with hulls that gleamed like mirrors. Carriers whose flight decks could launch 1,000 fighters at once. Weapons platforms that looked more like space stations than ships. Impressive sight, Admiral Park said, joining him at the observation window. It is, Li Wu agreed. Hard to believe we managed to keep them hidden for so long. The crews are proud of what they accomplished. 50 years of preparation and it worked exactly as planned. What happens now? Admiral Park was quiet for a moment. Now we broadcast the surrender to the galaxy. Every species that ever feared the Valtheran hegemony will know they're free. Every would-be conqueror will think twice before starting a war. And humanity? We go back to being peaceful traders and explorers. At least that's what it will look like. Li Wu turned to look at her. And really? Really, we keep building ships and training crews. Because there are other empires out there, Captain. Other species that think might makes right, and next time we might not have 50 years to prepare. That evening, Li Wu was finally able to contact his family on Earth. His wife, Song Mi, cried when she saw his face on the communication screen. Their daughter, little Han Buell, wanted to know if he had really been captured by aliens and whether they were scary. They were a little scary, Li Wu admitted. But they're not scary anymore. Did you win the war, Papa? Han Buell asked. Li Wu thought about that question. Had they won? The Valtheran fleet was surrendering. The invasion was stopped. Dozens of enslaved species would be free, but winning suggested it had been a contest when really it had been a trap. We ended the war, he said finally. Sometimes that's better than winning. Later, as he prepared for transport back to Earth, Li Wu made one final visit to the bridge. Kethvar was there, working with human officers to coordinate the fleet's surrender. The former war admiral looked up as Li Wu approached. Captain, Kethvar said, I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For showing restraint. Your species could have destroyed us all, but you chose mercy instead. Li Wu nodded. Mercy is just good strategy, War Admiral. Dead enemies can't learn to be allies. Kethvar extended his scaled hand in what Li Wu recognized as a gesture of respect. Perhaps in time that is what we might become. They shook hands. Former captor and former prisoner, both understanding that this moment would be remembered by historians for generations to come. As Li Wu walked toward the transport that would take him home, he caught his reflection in a polished wall panel. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to truly smile. Not the careful, controlled expression he had worn as a prisoner, but a genuine grin of satisfaction and relief. It was the grin of someone who had helped pull off the greatest military deception in galactic history. The grin of someone who had watched his species transform from apparent prey to apex predator in the span of a few hours. The grin of someone who knew that humanity's greatest strength had always been making others underestimate them. Most importantly, it was the grin of someone who had just ended a galactic war without firing a shot in anger. The Valtheran hegemony would surrender within the week. 17 enslaved species would regain their freedom. The balance of power in the galaxy would shift permanently, toward those who sought peace rather than conquest. And it had all started with a simple cargo captain who knew how to smile at exactly the right moment. The grin that ended a galactic war. The sensor display exploded with new contacts. What had been empty space moments before now showed hundreds of massive energy signatures. Ships were appearing everywhere, behind the moon, within the asteroid belt, at the Lagrange points, and in positions that should have been impossible to reach without being detected. Status report. Kethvar barked, his voice tight with growing alarm. The sensor officer's hands flew over his controls, his scaled face pale with disbelief. War Admiral, I'm reading over 3,000 new contacts. No, wait, 4,000. The numbers keep climbing. How is that possible? Our sensors would have detected any fleet that large. Sir, these ships, they're huge. Much larger than anything we've seen from the humans. Some of them are reading as bigger than our entire flagship. On the main display, the tactical map transformed before their eyes. The red cloud of Valtheran ships, which had seemed so dominant moments before, was now surrounded by an ocean of blue dots. The human fleet wasn't just appearing. It was emerging from concealment in a perfectly coordinated pattern that spoke of months or years of planning. Li Wu watched the growing panic on the bridge with quiet satisfaction. You wanted to know about our military, he said calmly. Well, now you're meeting them. Kethvar spun to face him. This is impossible. We monitored your communications for months before the invasion. We tracked your ship movements, your industrial capacity, your population centers. You cannot have built a fleet this large without us knowing. You're right, Li Wu agreed. We couldn't have built it without you knowing. So we built it where you weren't looking. Where? Li Wu's smile became almost pitying. Dark space, War Admiral. The empty regions between star systems where nobody goes because there's nothing worth finding. We've been preparing for this war since first contact with your species. The communications officer suddenly looked up from her station. War Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's from everywhere. Every human ship is broadcasting the same message. Put it through, Kethavar ordered, though his voice sounded strained. The main screen flickered, and Admiral Park Sun's face appeared again. But this time she wasn't on the bridge of a damaged warship fighting a hopeless battle. She was calm, confident, and surrounded by displays showing the tactical situation from a very different perspective. "War Admiral Kethavar," she said. "I am Admiral Park Sun, commander of Terra Defense Fleet Operations. You are now completely surrounded by over 5,000 ships of the Human Defense Force. Your invasion fleet is trapped with no possibility of escape." Kethavar stared at the screen in shock. 5,000 ships? Impossible. "I'm afraid it's quite possible," Admiral Park continued. "The fleet you just destroyed was composed entirely of volunteers, brave men and women who bought us the time we needed to get into position. Civilians mostly. Miners, transport crews, colonial militia. They knew they were probably going to die, and they did it anyway to protect their species." The words hit Li Wu like a physical blow. He had known the plan, had even helped design parts of it, but hearing it stated so plainly made the sacrifice real. Those 800 ships, those thousands of people who had died fighting the Valthurans, had been heroes in the truest sense. "This is a trick," Kethavar said, but his voice lacked conviction, some kind of sensor illusion. "Test it," Admiral Park suggested. "Fire on any of our vessels. You'll find they're quite real." Around the bridge, Valthuran officers were frantically checking their displays and running diagnostics. Every scan confirmed the same impossible truth. They were surrounded by a human fleet that dwarfed their own in both size and apparent capability. "How?" Kethavar asked, the word coming out as barely a whisper. Li Wu stepped forward. "Would you like the long explanation or the short one?" "Tell me," Kethavar ordered. "The short version is that humans are very good at 3 things: hiding, building, and planning for the worst-case scenario. The long version starts about 50 years ago, when we first made contact with the galactic community." Li Wu moved to stand beside the tactical display, pointing at the deployment pattern of human ships. "We learned very quickly that most species out there were either slaves or conquerors. There wasn't much middle ground. So we made a decision. Publicly, we would be peaceful traders and explorers. Privately, we would prepare for war." 50 years, Kethavar repeated. 50 years of secret shipyards in dark space. 50 years of developing technology in hidden research stations. 50 years of training crews and building weapons while pretending to be harmless merchants. Li Wu's voice carried a note of pride. "We're good at appearing weak while actually being strong," the sensor officer called out again. "War Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. They're charging weapons." "What kind of weapons?" Kethavar demanded. "Unknown types, sir. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases." Admiral Park's voice came through the communications again. "War Admiral, you have 1 hour to consider your options. You can surrender your fleet and be treated according to galactic conventions of war, or you can fight and be destroyed. Those are your only choices." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Kethavar looked around at his officers, seeing his own shock and confusion reflected in their faces. In less than an hour, they had gone from certain victory to facing complete defeat. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "I'm receiving reports from throughout the fleet. Our ship commanders are requesting orders." Kethavar was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display. Finally, he turned back to Li Wu. "Who are you really?" Li Wu straightened his shoulders. "Captain Li Wu, Terra Defense Force Special Operations." "Special Operations," Kethavar repeated. "You weren't captured. You were placed." "That's correct. My mission was to allow myself to be taken prisoner, observe your fleet's capabilities, and ensure that you committed your entire force to the attack on Earth." "The other prisoners?" "Yun-Na is one of our best intelligence specialists. Kim Jun is an expert on alien psychology and communication. Park Bo is a demolitions expert, though we didn't need his skills for this operation." Kethavar looked physically ill. "You orchestrated your own defeat to draw us into a trap." "We orchestrated the appearance of defeat," Li Wu corrected. "There's a difference. Those volunteers who died today knew exactly what they were doing. They were heroes, and their sacrifice saved not just humanity but probably dozens of other species that would have been your next targets." "How long have you known about our invasion plans?" "About 18 months. We have agents throughout the galaxy, War Admiral. Species that appear weak, but are actually very good at gathering information. The universe is full of people who want to see empires like yours stopped." The tactical display chimed softly. New information was appearing, showing the detailed specifications of the human fleet. Battleships the size of small cities, carrier vessels that could deploy thousands of fighters, weapons platforms that generated energy readings beyond anything in Valthiran military doctrine. 50 minutes remaining. Admiral Park's voice announced over the communications. Kethvar looked around his bridge one more time. His officers were waiting for orders, but what orders could he give? Fight a battle they couldn't win? Retreat to where? They were surrounded, outnumbered, and facing technology they didn't understand. "You planned this perfectly," he said to Li Wu. "We had good teachers," Li Wu replied. "Your species has conquered 17 star systems. We studied every one of those conquests, learned from every species you defeated. We know exactly how empires like yours think and operate. And now," Li Wu's expression softened slightly, "now you have a choice. Your people can live as part of a larger galactic community, or they can die as conquerors. But the age of the Valthiran hegemony is over either way." Kethvar closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked directly at Li Wu. "What guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply become the next galactic empire?" "None," Li Wu admitted, "except that we've had the power to conquer for decades and instead we chose to hide and prepare. We could have revealed ourselves and demanded tribute from weaker species. Instead we built a fleet to protect them." The War Admiral was quiet for a long time, the bridge silent except for the soft sounds of the ship's systems. Finally, he turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the human admiral," he ordered. "Yes, sir." Admiral Park's face appeared on the screen again. "War Admiral?" Kethvar straightened his shoulders and spoke with as much dignity as he could manage. "Admiral Park, I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender.